Okay. All right. Okay. So I'm just going to press live now, and then I'm going to stop talking, and then I'll let people in.
It's going live now. Here we go. I think it's working. Is that working?
You are live, actually.
Oh, hello everybody, and here we are live on Facebook. I have my super duper tech experts here. I might need a little bit of help now on sharing my screen for Zoom for my slides. Can you see my slides?
Yes, we can.
Yes, you can. Brilliant. Okie dokes. All right then. So we are Education Angels. We're a home-based education business here in New Zealand. And we are here presenting this webinar on how to give your child the very best start. So preparing your child for that really big step of starting school. I say your child, it's a big step for parents as well too. So let's not forget that. So in New Zealand, all children must start school by 6 and stay in formal education until the age of 16. And that is a legal requirement. And the only way around that is if you choose to homeschool, in which case you need to register as a homeschooler. Starting school is a huge milestone, and it can be very stressful for both parents and for children. And some common concerns from parents are, will our children make friends or not? That's a big worry for parents. Will they be bullied? May they be unhappy or happy? And will they measure up to the expectations of school? And we'll often, as well as parents, worry about our child's behaviour. You know, we want them to be popular, we want them to be liked, and we want them to be sociable and popular in school. And these are very real concerns for parents. Then add to this the pressure from well-meaning other adults as well. Often adults compare children, and we can all be guilty of this. We can believe that being able to read early is a sign of intelligence and put a lot of pressure, like peer pressure, on each other. You know, my child can read, my child can count, and, you know, toilet trained at 6 months, and all these crazy things that we hear other parents talking about that can actually put a lot of pressure on individuals, and boasting about other child's achievements too. And we can often feel when we hear all of this, that is my child meeting the developmental milestones? Are they doing as well as they should be? Because all of us want the best for our child, and all of us want our children to do well. So it's understandable that we can worry about these things. And I'm hoping that through our conversation today, we can alleviate a lot of those worries at the same time as giving you some really great tips and tricks and strategies on how to prepare your child for school. So what does it mean to be ready for school? So being ready for school, there are 3 most important things. And the interesting thing is these 3 things are often not discussed when we talk about getting ready for school. The number 1 thing is children being able to manage their own belongings and dress themselves independently. That's really, really important. Number 2 is self-regulation, being able to understand and manage my emotions effectively. Very critical skill for starting school, because you can imagine children are suddenly thrust into an environment where they have to get along with up to 30 other children in the classroom, or even more in the playground. So, and there can be a lot of unreasonable behavior for children starting school, not necessarily from your child, most likely from your child sometimes, but certainly from all children, because, you know, 5-year-olds are 5-year-olds. So you're going to expect that some of them will struggle with behaviors and managing their emotions effectively. And the third one is to be able to self-advocate, being able to communicate and express my needs and desires effectively to other people, to speak up for what I need. That's a really, really important skill. Because if you think about it, a teacher might have up to 30 children in a class, and they can't be there constantly watching one child and thinking about one child all the time. So we really need to teach our children to be able to speak up for themselves. So when we talk about managing ourselves, it's being able to dress ourselves, put on our own shoes. And we can help children along with this by finding clothing that's easy for them to manage. So, for example, instead of lace-up shoes, have Velcro. And most shoes are nowadays for young children. But that's a really helpful way to support your child, because often children can feel very rushed when they have to get changed to go outside or whatever activity they might be doing. Also, being able to look after my own belongings. It's a massive skill for a preschooler or a child who's a new entrance child to learn to look after all these belongings. You know, suddenly they've got a lunchbox, they've got a book bag, they've got a water bottle, they've got maybe spare clothes, maybe a book bag. And it's a lot to think about and a lot to look after. So to be teaching them skills early and before they start school is a really good way of preparing them. And being able to toilet independently. So not just to go to the bathroom on their own, but to be able to clean themselves afterwards properly, and, you know, to give themselves enough time to actually go to the bathroom and do what they need to do without having any accidents. So again, that's a big skill for children to learn. And we can teach all of this with lots of practice before they go to school, lots of coaching. So can your child self-regulate? And what does it mean to self-regulate? Well, it's our emotions, and we've talked about this in previous webinars. Our emotions are our guidance system for life. And those emotions can be really, really powerful, particularly for young people, for preschoolers and new entrance children whose higher brain is not yet as developed to understand what their emotions are telling them. So they can feel all this powerful surge of emotion. And of course, they're in new situations all the time in school, and that can be quite challenging to cope with. So we need to be able to give them self-regulation skills. And, you know, it starts way before school, but these are examples. Our children need to be able to develop relationships and contribute appropriately to group learning. So that means being able to manage our excitement, because sometimes we can be so excited and enthused by what's going on that we might be pushing our way in, we might be shouting above everybody else, and we might find ourselves in a situation where we're upsetting other people. So to be able to help our children to develop them skills is really, really important. Again, that links to children being able to listen and pay attention at math time, and to be able to, or when they're given simple instructions, and to be able to wait my turn, to manage impulses. Many adults struggle with this. So it's a huge thing for children to learn, and you can provide lots and lots of opportunities for your child to practice this in your home environment. And of course, the big one is being able to manage my lunchbox. That does take self-regulation skills, because if you see a lunchbox full of all this yummy food, then, you know, to manage that impulse and that desire to maybe eat dessert before your main course, or be able to eat all your favorite things in the morning, and then you've got stuff left for lunch that you're not so keen on, and, you know, just little things like that. So, and being able to eke out the lunchbox as well, and not take a bite of everything, put it all in the bin, and then you find you've got nothing then for lunchtime, which does happen. So it's really important that we teach our children how to manage that. And being able to advocate for ourselves. So again, we talked about this, speaking up if we need help. So, you know, that's really, really important, to be able to say, I need support here, or to ask a question and, you know, have our own needs met. To say no if something doesn't feel right for me. So that's critically important, because your children could be, you know, they're not, when children start school, they're not in that home environment with that one trusted adult. So they do find themselves in situations where they might be around other adults, might be around other parents, and also children. And it's really important that we teach our children to keep themselves safe. And there's lots on child protection that can teach us about this, and lots of child protection reasons why this is important. But it's important in relationships in school as well. So, you know, think of a situation where one child might try and encourage your child to do something that they know is wrong. That's a great example here. They need to be able to stand up for themselves and to be able to say, well, that's not right, and I'm not going to do that. And being able to comfortable to ask questions and share ideas. It's important for their own well-being in school as well as for their learning. So if your child is struggling with self-regulation or self-advocacy, then he or she could benefit from starting school a bit later. We don't have to start school until the year of our 6th birthday here in New Zealand. And there's been many studies, and this Stanford University study is one of them, one of many, where they have proved that starting school a bit later can actually have very positive impacts on children's learning. So, and the big reason for that, and this study and others explain this as well, the big reason for that is that children who start school a bit later have better self-regulation and better self-advocacy skills. And if our children can do both of those, then we're supporting them by providing an emotional, social and emotional environment for them to really engage in learning. So if anybody has any questions or comments, please do put them in the chat, and I can get somebody like Marcia or Sam to maybe read the questions out to me at some point. So happy to ask any questions as we go, but maybe we'll pause in a moment and see if there are any questions from anybody. So a big thing for starting school, and a big question and a big stress in many parents' minds is, what about reading and writing? And we see it, we're a home-based education company, and we often hear parents saying, well, are you going to teach my child to read? And it's important they know how to read before they start school. And we know that it happens in early childhood centres too, that parents might choose one centre over another because they think they'll teach them to read before they start school. Well, actually, that's not the best approach. Remember, self-advocacy and self-regulation are the most important skills. Once our children have those two skills, which are social and emotional skills, then they can better learn self-management skills, and also they develop the necessary dispositions for learning, which are all around curiosity, resilience, persistence, and all those skills that help us to persist through difficulty if we're struggling to learn something new, or to be resilient and bounce back when we make a mistake, and also to follow our curiosity and to really engage in learning. They're the most important skills. If we have all of them, then reading and writing becomes easy. But what is really good for your child to know before they start school, and I believe is important, is that that children, oops, don't know what I did there, guys, sorry about that, that children can enjoy books, that they enjoy books, they read with adults, they know that, you know, in reading a book, it's telling them a story, and they also know to turn the pages from left to right. That they understand that words and symbols have meaning and recognize some numbers. They may be able to count to 10 or know their alphabet, but it's not critically important that they do. That they can recognize their own name, and for some children, they may be able to even write their own name or write part of their name or recognize the first letter in their name. So you can see that the important thing here is understanding that symbols, words and numbers and symbols have meaning, and that they bring joy, and reading is fun. And of course, it is important that children have lots of opportunity to develop the fine motor skills so that they learn to hold a pencil correctly and they learn how to use scissors. And the reason we say these two things is because the children in these activities and other, like playing with Play-Doh, like collage, like fastening buttons, like shape sorting, any skills that use the fine motor skills and develops them is going to support children as they learn to write when they start school. Well, and before as well. You know, to be able to drawing pictures, mark making, all those things that we do with our children, preschool children, definitely support them and get them ready and give them the pre-reading and pre-writing skills. So to have a literacy rich environment, you know, if children see adults enjoying books, they're more likely to be readers themselves. So remember that children learn from what we do, not from what we say. So if you want your child to be a reader, then be a reader yourself. If you want your child to enjoy books, then read to them. And that reading doesn't have to stop when they start school either. And sharing text and sharing print, shapes, sorting shapes, showing them shapes, talking about shapes, recognizing numbers, counting out, I don't know, counting out lollies, counting out blocks, looking for shapes in buildings. All of these are really great ways of teaching your child pre-literacy and pre-numeracy skills. Well, they're literacy skills and numeracy skills as well, but they really set them up with a really strong foundation of numeracy and literacy for when they start school. Do we have any questions or comments, Marcia or Sam?
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
One of the comments from Leah said, Leah mentioned that good hand-eye and coordination is really important, and children really need to learn fine motor development before starting school. That's a very good point, Leah.
It's a very good point. That hand-eye coordination and the fine motor skills are so important. And, you know, does anybody have any other ideas, things that you do that develop those skills as well? There are lots of good things to do, but, you know, it's always great to share ideas so other people can practice these at home too. So how to prepare your child? How do we prepare them? So we know what they need to know and we know why they need to know it. So what do we do to help them along and to prepare them for this very important milestone? So really, really important thing is that you as parents and your child find the school that best suits you. So you will know, I always say that parents need to trust their intuition. You know what's best for your child. So I would suggest that you look at a number of schools. Don't just go to the one that's on your doorstep. You know, you might choose that school, but that's not the only school available to you. So have a look around and go and speak to the teachers, go and look at the environment, take your child with you and just see what's out there, see what options are available to you. Ask about their rhythms and rituals and ask about their curriculum and how it's delivered. Most, if not all schools in New Zealand have, or new entrance classes have a play-based curriculum, which is really good. That really supports the transition from preschool being in home-based or centre-based education or kindy into the school environment, because a play-based curriculum allows children to lead their own learning, following their own interests. And if children are engaged, then they're learning. And it's much easier for children to settle into a similar learning environment with a play-based curriculum if that's what they've been used to beforehand. So once you've chosen a school, become familiar with, first of all, the start and finish times, times of breaks and times for lunch, and also ask about how your child can look after their own belongings and look after themselves. Remember, one of the 3 most important things is to be able to look after their own belongings. So because that can be really stressful for children. So the easiest way to remove that stress and make school a much more positive experience for our children is to find out before they start how these things work in the school. And then once you know that, then say, for example, knowing what the drop-off and pick-up routines are. Again, a huge time of stress when they're being dropped off at school and they're left in this less than familiar environment with a teacher they've only met a couple of times and a whole load of other children that they don't know very well. It can be very, very stressful. So it's really important that you are empathetic towards your child if they are hesitant, if they're a bit frightened to go in and, you know, a bit clingy to you, because that is perfectly normal. And what your child needs is lots of reassurance. They might need you to take them into the class. And I think most new entrance teachers would be very, would encourage that, if not make that a requirement anyway in the early days. So know what time the school day starts, so you settle your child into the classroom before the bell rings, and then it's not that frantic rushing to drop them off and then run off to work, as most of us have to do. Know where to pick your child up from at the end of the day, at the end of the session. So it could be that the school want you to go into the classroom. It could be that for some schools, they say, meet me at the gate. Every school will have their own way of doing it, but you want to make sure that you have that time for a really good handover. So you know how your child's been. Even if it's just a thumbs up, a nod and a wave, you need that acknowledgement. And the opportunity to speak with the teacher too, if you've got any concerns or if your child has. And find out the best way to communicate with your teacher too. You know, it can be an incredibly busy time dropping off in the morning and after school. And sometimes teachers are going to fulfill other tasks like planning, like marking, like resetting the environment, or like running an out of school club. You know, it could be a multitude of responsibilities that teacher has once she leaves the classroom. So find out beforehand, before your child starts school, what's the best way for me to communicate with you, and agree together how you're going to communicate if either of you have any concerns about the well-being of your child. And many schools use Educa or a similar Story Park or a similar online portal. So very often it's very easy to just message parents through that portal, and then you get a message in your email, and it could be that message is, let's make a time to chat, or it could be just to let you know that your child had a good day. But you want to know also how you can best communicate with the teacher if you've got any questions and concerns, because it's a huge emotional journey for yourself as well as your child. So don't forget that, and don't worry about asking too many questions. Teachers are used to it and expect it to. And if your child sees that you have a good relationship with the teacher, it'll support your child's relationship too. So excuse me, I can hear the dog barking, so I'm just going to shut this door. So sorry about that. Yeah, so if your child sees that you get on well with the teacher and that communication is open between the two of you, then that's really going to support your child's relationship with that teacher too. So, and know, like I say, know how you can seek support as well. And if anybody has had a child who's recently started school and you've got any tips that you'd like to offer anybody watching this webinar or even in the Facebook group, please go ahead and do that. It'd be really good to have a supportive community here where we can all offer our wisdom, share our wisdom with others. So it's really important that your child has at least 2 transition visits before they start school, because for children to learn, they have to feel safe and secure. If they don't feel safe, and remember we talked about this when we did our previous webinars on behavior guidance, that if the higher brain is not engaged, then we can't learn effectively. And if we think about the brain being, someone showed me this yesterday, and I think it's a great way of remembering it. If we think about this part of our arm being the brainstem, and then our thumb being the amygdala is the fight or flight part of the brain. The fear response is all in the amygdala. So we go up the brainstem, messages come up the brainstem to the amygdala, which is in the center of the brain, and then our higher brain folds over the amygdala. So you've got a fist here. So if anything happens that's stressful to a child in the learning environment, then they can flip their lid, right? Their higher brain, they can go straight to fear. Fear and anxiety is in the amygdala. As soon as that happens, the higher brain disengages, and children are not capable of thinking. They're not capable of learning. They're going to be more reactive than responsive. And that's when we see many behavioral challenges and tantrums, etc. So for our children to learn effectively, we need to make sure that our brain is in this state, that the higher brain is engaged, and that they're feeling safe and secure. So for children to feel safe and secure, they need to be in a familiar environment with a familiar carer. So of course we know it's unrealistic that your child will have this really close bond with the teacher before they start school, because there's not that same opportunity as there might be with a home-based educator or a childcare centre. However, that said, at least if your child is familiar with the environment and familiar with the teacher, then that's tremendously helpful. It might just be enough for there not to be a fear response. There might be still some anxiety, but they might not quite have flipped their lid. They might still be managing to self-regulate and keep their fear and anxiety under control. So this is why transition visits are really, really important. So we say you need at least 2. So work with your school and arrange visits with them, and make sure that you are comfortable with the number of visits as well as your child. And you want your child to be as familiar as possible with the environment before they start. So a little tip is, when you do go around the school, yes, you need to find out where their bags go. Children can get really, really stressed about what to us might seem a simple thing. Their school bag, they're so proud of this bag, and it's got all their bits of treasure in there, a few stones they've picked up on the way to school that are really important tonga or treasure to them. And their pens and their book bag and their drink bottle and their lunch, they're going to feel quite stressed if they don't know where to put them, or they don't know how to retrieve them when they need to. So it's really important that your child understands that. And a good idea is, when you go to look at the school, then take a photograph of the areas. So when you go to where all the pegs are and the bags are stored, take a photograph of that. And the same too, when you find out where they need to put their lunchbox, take a photograph of that as well. And where the bathrooms are. It can be really scary for some children in a new environment to actually put the hands up and ask in front of a whole group of people where the bathrooms are, when maybe they feel they should know, or maybe they've left it a little bit too late because they're not as familiar with the environment and not feeling so comfortable to make that move early. So the more you can take photographs and talk about it. Some schools will have a book that actually says, here, welcome to our school, here are where we keep our pegs, here's the bathrooms, here's where we have lunch. And this book will have photographs in there, so you've got all these photographs ready and available. But if they haven't, don't be shy in taking the photographs yourself as you go around the school. And knowing when they can use the bathroom too. It might seem obvious to us that for a preschooler, they can go to the bathroom whenever they need to, But for some children, they might worry about that and might need to be reassured. And where do they have lunch? I know that's something I'd be worrying about if I was in a new environment. And it's perfectly natural that children would too. And then, most importantly, who can they speak with if they need help? You know, to make sure that your child knows they can speak to the teacher if there's something they need help with. Are we all good? Any comments or questions?
There's one question, Angie. What would you do if your child was not ready for school, and after they've done their preschool sessions, and they've started, but they're just not settling?
You can give the school notice. You can say to the school that you would like to put your child back into a home-based or centre-based or kindy environment. You would need to give them notice and just explain that you're going to do that, so that you're not claiming funding in both school and early childhood settings. But you can do that for children who are under 6. You don't legally have to have them in school until their 6th birthday. So if this child's under 6, you can definitely take them out of school. Good question. And it takes courage to do that. But I do urge any of you to read the research on this. And there's no benefit to starting school early. And in some countries, children don't start school until they're 7. So 6 is still very young to start school. And remember, it's the self-regulation, self-advocacy, and being able to manage your own belongings. If children can't do those 3 things, then it adds tremendously to their stress in the school environment. Once they've got those 3 things mastered, then it makes everything else so much easier to cope with.
Yeah.
Good question.
Thank you. Rachel has just popped a response up saying you're not allowed to send a child back to preschool after they've started to primary school. Rachel, would you like to just sort of unmute and talk a little bit about that with Angie?
Yeah, it'd be great to learn more about that, because I'm sure we've had that happen before. So I don't know how they managed to do that, if that's the case. Why is that, Rachel? Do you know?
I don't know if you can hear me or not.
Yeah.
I'm a centre manager, and under compliance for early childhood, government regulations state that once a child has started primary school, they may not return to preschool. It's actually
I think it's whilst they're enrolled in school, Rachel. So you'd have to,
if you are still settling, if your child is still doing settling visits,
yeah,
actually started, and
yes,
work, then you can go back to preschool. But once your child has taken off, has started at primary school, they're no longer settling visits, but they've actually started, they cannot return to preschool after that.
That's really interesting. But if they unenroll from school and go back,
no, the government won't allow that. There'll be no funding for the child. It's just like a child, once they've left, can't go back to preschool in the school holidays or anything like that. Home-based care may be different, but in a preschool, absolutely not. It's a compliance thing.
So that might be how we got around it, that they couldn't claim funding because the school had the funding. But I'm sure that we managed to do it in the 2nd term. So when your child enrolled, it's worth looking into, Rachel. Like, you raise a really good point there. So it might be possible, but you can't be funded, because once you enroll in school and your child started school, then the school get the funding for that whole term.
So they do it, but for us, we can't even have a child return. It's a non-compliance. The government will shut the centre down. You cannot take a child back once they've started at primary school. It's not just a funding. It's actually a legal thing. Yeah. They can't be there. So
yeah. I understand that. So what I'm saying is that we've had it happen before that a child has, but I think what happened is they actually unenrolled, and it was the 2nd term, because once you enroll in school, the school gets the funding for that whole term.
They do. So, if you're home-based, it could be very different too, because of course you can.
No, I think it's the same. It's the same. It's the same funding rules, Rachel. So it's exactly the same. Yeah. So you probably wouldn't be funded, or at least not for that whole term. Right. But it's worth looking into. So I think the key is, if you're going to make a decision to keep your child back in early childhood until they're 6, it's best not to start school. But I would definitely, if any of you are in a situation where your child started school and you think they benefit from being in early childhood or at home longer, then it's important that you do phone the Ministry of Education first and find out once they've started school. But certainly the school would get the funding for that whole term for sure. Yeah, absolutely, you're right. So the technicality about what happens next term, I'm not sure. I can't remember. But legally, they don't have to be in school until they're 6. But once they've started, like I say, best to double check with the Ministry of Education. Any other questions around that? Thanks, Rachel, for that input. Okay, cool. Shall we carry on? Okay. So again, different schools have different timetables for meals as well. So it's really important you find out what your school does, what their timetable is. Like some schools will have a fruit break before a morning tea break and then a lunch, whereas some schools might just have morning tea and lunch. So being aware of what the rhythm is, then you can try before your child starts school, then try and align their body rhythms with the rhythms of meal times for when they start school as well, because in that way you're more likely to get them into, they're less likely to have bouts of real hunger, which can affect their behavior and their concentration, because their body is used to the same rhythm of, I don't know, eating morning tea at 9:30 or having a fruit break at 9:15 and then morning tea at 10 o'clock, whatever it might be for your school. It's really helpful to match the body rhythms, the rhythm of eating with that of school, because like I say, it'll help to stave off any bouts of hunger. And really importantly, teaching your child to open their own packets of yogurt or chippies or sandwich wrappers, whatever it might be that you have in your child's lunchbox. And, you know, as an adult, sometimes I can struggle with some packaging and manage to burst everything all over the place or wherever it might be. It's quite challenging for young children to learn this. You know, if you're using your own plastic containers, sometimes the lids can be really, really tricky, especially for small fingers. Now, practicing with these is really good for their fine motor skills. However, it does take practice. So you want your child to be able to competently open the packaging and to practice that in a safe space before they start school. So again, teaching your child how to manage their lunchbox before starting school as well. And many centres will teach this. And certainly, you know, speaking to your home-based educator as well, they can help to teach your child how to do this. Or you can do so at home if your child's not in early childhood settings or with a home-based educator. And, you know, that's a great way to do it, is to get them to make the lunchbox in the morning and choose what they'd like, you know, from healthy options, but choose what they'd like in their lunchbox, to make the lunchbox up themselves and then make it into a bit of an activity, make it into a fun game or activity where you eat out of the lunchbox for the whole day. And you can do the same. So you're doing this together and you're then saying, right, well, it's fruit break now. So that means we just eat our piece of fruit. And then you can get them to watch the clock and tell you then when it's time to have morning tea. And then you can coach and mentor them. Well, what kind of food do we eat for morning tea? Of course, that's for you to decide. You're the one that's making up their lunchbox. But suffice to say, you want your child to understand that for fruit break, they're eating the fruit. For morning tea, they're having something small, a snack. And then for lunch, they're going to have their main sandwich or whatever it might be that you have in the lunchbox for them. Because the last thing you want is your child to think, wow, yummy, this is a party, I've got all this food. And like I say, they open everything at once and it all ends up like a big mushy mess in their lunchbox. And then the poor child has to face that then for lunch. And that's going to be no fun at all. So it's really important that your child learns how to manage this before school. Excuse me. Any questions or comments? Anybody offer any more tips and tricks on this? I'm sure we've got a wealth of wisdom out there. And Rachel, if you're in a centre, I'm sure, do you have any tips on managing lunch boxes or teaching children these essential skills?
We have a basket that we use. It's got a whole lot of different containers in it and different boxes with lids and bottles. The biggest thing that parents need to consider are those sucky yogurts. They are very, very difficult for a child to open the lid of. So you kind of need to loosen that before they go to lunch. They're not going to be able to open it by themselves. And thermoses, if you have hot food in a thermos and close the lid on it, the child is not, it seals, and the child's not going to be able to open that at lunchtime either. So
yeah,
definitely loosen things before you open them.
Yeah, good. And again, you know, when we're teaching children self-advocacy, things like this, if they're struggling with the lunchbox and they're too scared to ask for help, then, you know, they could find that they're skipping some of their lunch and might be a little bit hungry. So this is why this all links back to each other, teaching them to advocate for themselves and to ask if they need help. Because even adults can sometimes struggle with pots and containers. So particularly if it's got, you know, like a bit of a vacuum that's made it seal like it's welded. So yeah, really important skills. Thank you. Thanks, Rachel. And often this gets forgotten. You know, if your child is going to be going to after school care, remember too that they need to have a transitioning period for their out of school club as well. So, and you'd want to be managing that transition like you manage school. So it could be that they have a holiday club your child could go to before school even starts. Or it could be that you could go for, like with school, you could go for some sessions with them and get to know the teacher. It could be that your teacher can support by, some schools have out of school care as part of the school grounds. So it could be that the new entrance teacher helps with children transitioning the out of school care. But it is something that you need to consider because, you know, after a long day at school, that can be stressful in itself. Then to be going to another environment like out of school care without having a proper transition, then we are expecting a lot from our children. So it's really important we consider that as well. So what do we pack in our child's bag? Now, there's no such thing as a silly question. It's really important that you ask the school about packing your child's bag and about lunch bags as well, because different schools might have different rules around this. But as a rule of thumb, we would suggest a change of clothes, warm jersey or t-shirt, wet weather clothing. So something to change into, because any child can spill water on themselves, they can have an accident, they can be sick, they can get wet in activities. Really important that they've got something nice and warm to change into. Obviously their lunchbox, and many schools will have a place where they put their lunchbox when they go into school. Often doesn't remain in their bag. So again, finding this out when you go on the visit is important. A drink bottle, so important that we keep our children hydrated. So to have their own drink bottle, knowing where to put that and having that ready available, so important. And a sun hat too. And then also many schools will have a book bag, but the school will tell you what you need to pack. And it could be that some schools have rules about what you can put in their bag and what needs to be sent in at the beginning of the day or given by parents. And also if your child does have any medical requirements, then really important that you speak with the teacher about that and find out what needs to happen to ensure the safety of your child. And remember, a child can't learn effectively if they're hungry. So our safety and security needs, our basic human needs have to be met before we can learn. So, you know, a few more tips on lunch boxes. Check with your school around rules, like it could be that you can't pack anything that contains nuts, for example. Many schools and early childhood centres do have that as a rule because of other children potentially having allergies. So again, making sure containers and packets can be opened independently. Where possible, keep the lunchbox items consistent. This helps your child get into the habit of eating certain parts of their lunchbox. Now, I'm not suggesting you send the same thing every day, but until your child is settled, maybe for the first couple of weeks of school, if you decide it's going to be a yogurt and a sandwich, then make it a yogurt and a sandwich until they're really competent at opening those containers or the wrapping that they come in, and then vary it as your child develops the skills and also becomes really confident in being able to manage it themselves. And if your child comes home hungry or with a full lunchbox, or, with that whole messy mush of all things being packed in together and a sloppy mess, then do speak with their teacher, because it could be that your child does need a little bit of extra support. Because sometimes, no matter what you do before your child starts school, and no matter how much they seem to have perfected the art and get it right while they're at home with you, in their safe and secure environment, sometimes that can all go out of the window when they start school, particularly if we're in this situation where, we're stressed and our higher brain we've flipped our lid, our higher brain is disengaged. So if you find that your child's hungry or there's something quite not right, lunchbox is coming home full, then do speak to the teacher. In new entrance classes, there will be somebody with them whilst they're eating all of the time. So don't worry about asking questions, and asking that your child has a bit more support during those meal times. So starting school is a massive step for both of you. So do expect your child to be tired when they get home. And you know your child better than anybody. So you know that whether, for your child, it could be they come home and just want to sit around, they want to cuddle, they want to sit and read a book. It could be that they become a bit hyperactive, or they start to act out. You see a change in their behavior. For most children, this is the case. Most children will act out when they start school. Some will regress. They'll start to act like a baby, or they'll start to ask you to help them with things that they've been able to do for themselves for a long time. And this is just because they're struggling emotionally with the huge change, and they've probably had a really stressful day, and they're just going back to that place of safety and security. So, be patient. It's okay. It'll be a transition. It will stop in time as your child gets used to the new rhythms, rituals, the new environment, and the new people. So expect your child to be more attention seeking. To demonstrate one or two of this list, either be more attention seeking, a bit more clingy, tired and irritable, maybe a bit withdrawn at times, or more prone to outbursts of emotion. And sometimes for children as well, they'll complain of stomach ache and other minor ailments. Now, they're not making this up. Stress is often felt in the stomach. So, see that as a sign of stress. If it goes on for extended periods, get it checked out, of course. But again, you know your child better than anybody else. And these little behavior changes could be are most likely going to be due to stress if they've just started school. And you should see that, with lots of TLC and reassurance that these go away within a fairly short period of time. So unless we've got any questions, that is the end of what I wanted to share. And sorry, you've just shown you my template slide. So does anybody have any questions or comments?
Is it Angie, I do have a question right here.
Yeah.
Because I really experienced this firsthand when I sent my firstborn son to school during his first day. He was throwing a tantrum, and I had to sit in the class just to help him settle down. Would that still be helpful, or how do you handle that kind of behavior?
It sounds like you did the right thing. So he threw that tantrum because of this. Remember the brainstem, the amygdala, which is in the midbrain. It's part of the fight or flight response, the fear response. And then we've got the higher brain, which is still developing for children of this age. So what's happened is that he's been so stressed that the higher brain is disengaged and he's just lost control of his emotions. So it's a stress response. It's not a bad behavior. It's your child being so overwhelmed with stress that they've gone to fight or flight. He's gone to panic. So what your child needs, I think, is in that situation is exactly what you did, to be able to stay with him, to reassure him until he feels better and safer in the environment. And did that work, Sam? Did it take a few times and then he was okay? How did it work?
It worked for a few days, and then once he got used to his classmates and the teachers, he was confident he could do it on his own.
There you go. So you being a really sensitive, caring parent, you've really supported him in doing that, because he's seen that you've been comfortable in the environment. He's seen that you're talking to his teachers, he sees you interacting with them and engaging them, and you're comfortable in that space, and that's very reassuring for him too. So that really is the best thing you can do.
Thank you,
What's
Auntie.
that first thing to understand? Parenting is leadership, isn't it? So good leadership strategy is first seek to understand, to lead with curiosity and see what's going on. But that if a child is thrown a tantrum, that they've lost control. So sometimes they just need you to support them to regain control and then cope with the situation. So well done. That was good parenting.
Thank you.
All right. Well, if we've got no other questions, I shall leave you. But if anybody has any questions or comments, please do put it in the chat, and we can just have a look anytime and engage in the conversation with you. I do wish everybody well. It's a very exciting journey when a child starts school. Yes, albeit stressful, but then most big decisions and big steps in life both bring joy and stress at the same time, like anything new. So I wish you all the very best, and I thank everybody for joining us. And yeah, reach out if there's anything you want from us, or if you're interested in any of our provision. Our web link is in the Facebook page, and we'll let you know on this page too when our next webinar is. If you have any special requests about topics on what you'd like us to discuss with you, or what you'd like to see, please put them in too, and we'll go with the most popular, or most requested, I should say. Great. Thanks, everybody. Take care.